back to WCB Jazz Vinyl. Today I want to talk about ultrasonic cleaning machines. Now, what I'm not going to talk about are the $800, $900, I don't know, $2,000 machines, or even the $600 Humming Guru. Basically, what happened a few years ago was this. I wanted an ultrasonic cleaning machine, and I thought I could DIY it. And I saw a bunch of other people doing it too, and so I jumped on that bandwagon. Basically, I purchased a jewelry ultrasonic cleaning machine, added the capability to clean records with like a motor and a spindle. And it basically just took a trip to Home Depot, plus ordering a few things online, and I could really build it. I think I built it in about 30 minutes. So a few problems though that I encountered. One is the ultrasonic machine that I had was incredibly loud, so I could only use it really outside. I had these rubber stoppers to go in between the records so I could clean multiple ones at the same time. But they started getting like gouged out, and there basically wasn't enough friction to really hold the records. Plus, the spindle was slightly too small. So basically, I lost friction, and the record wouldn't necessarily keep spinning with the motor, and it just sort of would stay static instead while the spindle moved. So that's some of the background here. Now, last week, a company called Vevor reached out to me with their own product that looks like this. So what this is it combines a jewelry ultrasonic cleaning machine with all the materials that I needed to clean records. So instead of it being like a DIY thing, it's basically a bundled solution ready to go. Now, generally speaking, I don't do these kinds of reviews. In fact, I think I've had at least a dozen companies, probably more than that, over time reach out to me about reviewing their turntables, and every single time I refuse. And the reason is, well, those turntables are typically all-in-one units, but the reason is that I'm not going to review something unless it's something that I actually think that I would use. So guess what? The ultrasonic cleaning machine is something that I would use, especially if it improves on that DIY thing that I put together. So here we are. They sent me this machine. I had the opportunity to use it, compare it to my DIY model. And here's the funny thing. Before we get into it, me buying all of those materials several years ago cost me about $193. Well, the retail price on this Vevor unit before discounts, which I think they may be doing right now, the retail on it is $199. So it's essentially an equivalent price. So I thought that this would be an interesting opportunity to review. Again, is it better? How's the sort of the build quality? Obviously, does it work? And what do I think, especially compared to my DIY unit? So that's what we're going to dive into today. Now, I know everyone out there is considering, what can you give me for the holidays? Just know that you can subscribe to my channel, and it'll let you know when I post new videos. And then see, it's the gift that keeps on giving. Otherwise, you can follow me on Instagram. I'm at what_can_brown. All right, so first things first, let's try to unbox this ultrasonic cleaning machine. This blue cover is probably more applicable for when you're, I don't know, storing this without the actual attachment on it. Just goes over the ultrasonic cleaning machine. So they included a hose, which is useful for actually draining, so you don't have to tip the whole unit. Looks like some power cord, power assembly kinds of stuff here. All right, so these are the sort of acrylic discs that go in between the records so that you have spacers and you can clean multiple records. Little sort of catch thing if you're going to clean jewelry, I think. Looks like some clamps, probably some sort of motor housing. They do include instructions here, although I will say that the instructions are somewhat limited. So there's the operation of the actual, call it the jewelry machine, and then there's the putting together the record sort of apparatus that goes on it. And this is the actual ultrasonic cleaning machine, basin and sort of, well, the actual machinery part of it. And here we actually have some attachments to mount the records as well as a drying rack. So taking a closer look at this machine, this is pretty familiar to me anyway. That's where the water drains out. You can see there's some buttons on here so you can set the time as well as the temperature. And on the back, we sort of have the master power switch as well. All right, so I wanted to point out the only tool you need for this is a screwdriver, and you really only need it for about a second. So what I'm doing here is I'm setting a timer just to show you in real time. And don't get me wrong, I speed this up, but you can see what happens to the timer. This is how long it takes me to actually complete the full installation or the full assembly of this record cleaning unit. It's pretty simple. There's just a couple of things that you sort of have to screw in. Again, they don't have written out instructions. And so part of the reason it takes me a little bit longer is I'm just sort of figuring it out based on what I see there in the picture. But you can see again that that timer, it's not going very it's not extending past a couple of minutes, and to the extent that I'm even taking longer than that, it's just because I'm trying to make sure I'm doing it correctly. All right, so this is the drying rack, and this one they actually didn't include instructions for, but fortunately it's not complicated. I actually went onto their website to take a quick look to just double check exactly how it's lined up. But this is actually super helpful because my DIY unit, I did not have a drying rack whatsoever, and my solution was simply to basically set records on top of like cups and things like random things that would suspend the record in the air while it was drying. And so the idea that they included this probably 3D printed drying rack for multiple records is actually just super handy. All right, so first I'm going to show you how to put just a single record on, and then we'll move to multiple records. So the first thing that I'm doing is I'm putting these separators on, just a couple of them to offer some buffer. You'll notice these actually have a protective film on it, so they're actually crystal clear, sort of acrylic ones, but I haven't yet removed that film. So single record goes on like so, and because the threading only goes down partially down the spindle, you kind of need to add in this extra buffer so that when you put that this little screw top that it goes just right up against these again these acrylic discs, so that holds it on pretty tight. And you can see down here, if I was going to turn it on right now and if there was fluid in, that I would do that. And there's just the power button on the back. And I know it may be slightly difficult to tell that it's spinning, but it is indeed, yep, there you can see it. It is indeed spinning the record correctly, and it's not hitting either side of the ultrasonic cleaning machine. All right, so this probably goes without saying, but multiple records follow the same process. Now, one thing you'll notice is that I have actually put distilled water inside the ultrasonic cleaning machine. I did not use tap water, I used distilled water, but otherwise at the moment, there's no other solution in there. In the past, with my DIY unit, I've used a surfactant as well as isopropyl alcohol. I think there's still an argument over the appropriate way to do it, but for the moment, it's distilled water. Now, you'll see what I'm doing here is I'm topping it up, and the reason why is because I put the record in, and I noticed that not all of the grooves of the record were submerged into the water, and you want that to happen. So what I'm doing is I'm just refilling, even though it looks like it's out of a kettle, and that implies not distilled water. Don't worry, it is distilled water. I just use that so it wouldn't be splashing all over the place as I pour it in. So here you can see again the acrylic disc, and again I have not yet taken the sort of protective film off of it. But what that acrylic disc does is offer just enough of a buffer between the records so that they don't obviously you don't want them rubbing up against each other or hitting each other. To the extent that that could still happen, that's probably going to be based on whether or not your record has any significant warp in it. But otherwise, you can use one or you can use a couple of these acrylic discs to put in between each record. Now, the claim of this unit is that it can accommodate 7 records. I'm actually going to test 6, just because even if it does have the ability to accommodate 7 records, which from a size standpoint, I think it certainly does. I probably won't be using it to clean more than say 3 at a time, and I think that the only reason is that an ultrasonic cleaning machine doesn't have the ability to clean an unlimited amount of surface area. It should theoretically reduce its effectiveness the more material that's actually submerged. So I will probably, when using this, I'll probably limit it to just a couple of records at a time. But do know that there is the ability for it to accommodate more than that. Again, I'm putting in 6, but I do believe that it would accommodate 7 as well, which I think is sort of what Vevor references on their website. So here you can see I've sort of crowded it, and I'm spinning this on again. The threading ends at a certain point, and I want to make sure that that they aren't sliding around, right? That there's a fairly tight connection here. All right, so now I flipped on the master switch, and on the left is the temperature, on the right is the timer. Now the temperature sort of auto sets itself to 35, and that's actually what I like to turn it to. 35 or 34 degrees is what I like to keep the water at. That's Celsius. Obviously, you don't want to melt the records, and the temperature. Know that the temperature will go up with time as well, so you kind of want to keep an eye on it. Then on the right is the timer, and so the maximum that it allows you to, probably rightly so, is 30 minutes. I tend to like to set a timer for about 15 minutes, but obviously it depends on how many records you have in there. Now, note that this machine actually spins at a constant speed, and it's not adjustable. And so the thing to look out for is, does the water sort of drip down onto the label? And in this case, it does not. All right, so now you know how it works and that it works. So let's talk maybe just a little bit more about how this compares with my DIY one. And I kind of alluded to some of this up front, sort of early in the video. Here's the thing. The base model, the sort of the basic ultrasonic component of these two units is really the same thing. So they both generate high frequency sound waves that essentially act as a scrubber of sorts to like remove contaminants from records in this case, right? And that process is called cavitation. So this particular model by Vevor uses 40 kilohertz frequency and 180 watts of power. And guess what? Those are the actual the same characteristics of my DIY one as well. So the actual functional aspect of whether the ultrasonic cleaner cleans, well, it does, but both of these units do. And in fact, they're actually both 6-liter capacity containers as well. So the real difference, I think, in how well, in whether the Vevor is better than my DIY unit is how well they've adapted it for records. That is the key element here that I want to talk about. Because that adaptability really is what you pay for when it comes to even some of the higher priced alternatives. So I mentioned up front a few of the problems that I had with my existing cleaner. And I want to kind of I want to go down each of these in order of what I believe is the most important. So starting with what is the most important are the spacers. So I showed you before, these essentially these acrylic discs. So since I showed that video, I've actually removed the protective film. So they're, you can see that they're clear. So these are the spacers that come with the Vevor unit. All right. Now, the spacers that I had with my existing unit looked something like this. So this is the actual, spindle that goes onto the motor, and I have these rubber stoppers, right? So the problem with these rubber stoppers is a couple of things. Because these are relatively tight, in order to make sure they're securely on the spindle and they don't move around and that they actually have some surface area sort of connected to the label of the record, the holes that I drilled are fairly small. And over time, and I don't know if you can tell if the camera will focus on this, but they sort of get gouged out over time, which means that they essentially lose their effectiveness. I think these things also may be susceptible to some dry rot as well. So the challenge anyway is that these are kind of hard to get on and off initially, and then they quickly become easier because the hole gets bigger and therefore they become less effective. But essentially what you do is you have one of these on, you stick the record on, and then you stick this other one on here, and you sort of sandwich the record, right? But these are also not completely flat. I think they're probably, well, they're just they weren't engineered. These are rubber. They aren't engineered to be perfectly flat on both sides, so they're not really providing sort of sufficient pressure on both sides of the record in order to accurately or adequately secure it. And it's one thing for me to just say that, but I've actually witnessed this when I stick this in my DIY unit and it starts spinning, and you see that these will start to spin but like leave the record behind. It doesn't provide enough surface area to clamp the record, so to speak, so that it doesn't move. And what you really don't want is one of these rubber stoppers starting to leave black marks on your, call it, Blue Note label, right? Because it's not providing that kind of clamping action. So with these acrylic ones, what I've noticed is, well, first of all, the acrylic is not going to be susceptible to dry rot, and it's not going to warp either. And the surface area of these things is actually quite large, and in fact about the exact same size as the label. So that's very handy, where you have much more surface area of essentially the record going in between these two things, covering the entire label. And because you have that kind of screw clamp on, which provides some pressure this way, whereas the other ones don't, it's just the rubber stoppers. It does a better job of securing the record in place and making sure that it's turning the record. So that's the first thing that I noticed that the Vevor unit does better than my DIY unit. So the second thing is the sound. Now, technically, both of these ultrasonic cleaners should have the same amount of sound. It's just that I think that there's some type of mitigation that's been put in place for the Vevor unit because it is significantly quieter. Now, don't get me wrong, it is not silent by any means, and you probably still won't really want to be like relaxing in the same room that your ultrasonic cleaner is, while it's working. But the difference is that I wouldn't even want my DIY one in the house because it was so loud. I would put it outside and I would still hear it from inside the house. Whereas the Vevor unit is, again, it's not silent, but it's significantly quieter, where I don't think I'd be waking the neighbors if I was living in a apartment situation using the Vevor unit. So the sound is certainly not as bad, but again, it still has some volume. All right, so the next thing, if I can grab it here, is the drying rack. So I mentioned this before, but how I would dry records in the past was taking like a cup like this. And I don't have any records nearby, well, they're all around me, but I would stick the record, right, just on top of this. And so the idea would be that, the glass is only making contact with the label, and then I would just let the thing air dry. But the problem is on my kitchen counter, I would have like a number of cups all over the place holding records while they're drying. And I like to, when I fill one of these ultrasonic cleaners with distilled water, I don't like to just clean 1 or 2 records. I like to clean more than that. So therefore, this drying rack that I put together, and I know I've showed you a kind of a close-up of it earlier, is actually quite handy because you can dry, I think I had 6 in it before, and I probably could have fit 8. So it's pretty handy to have one of these things. In a way, I wonder if you could order more of these, because then you could have like, just an easy way, right, to store. Let's say that you wanted to ultrasonically clean like 50 records one Saturday or something. You could have a number of these things just kind of sitting around. Now, I don't know exactly how long it would, I don't know how long it would take, I suppose, in order to, to say just put in 6 or 8 of them here and then wait, for them to fully dry. I haven't actually done that kind of like methodical timing. Typically, I would just kind of leave them out and then come back a while later and they'd be dry. Of course, the other way you can do it is I have a VPI cleaner and I could run them through the VPI if I wanted to. But certainly if I'm spending time doing the ultrasonic cleaning, having some of these handy is very nice. And the fact that they included them, I think, or this, they included this is actually quite nice as well. And because they have these wing nuts on each of these, you can adjust the spacing, right? So if you were going to clean, say, 10-inch records or 7-inch records, you'd be able to adjust this accordingly. Now, one of the things I do want to bring up when I just said 7-inch, this is the case actually for both my DIY unit as well as the Vevor unit. You would need to have an adapter for your 7-inch singles. So 7-inch singles have a big hole, right? I'm not actually certain. First of all, it doesn't come with an adapter. And second of all, even if it did, I'm not certain that you'd be able to fill the ultrasonic cleaner sufficiently high enough in order for the water essentially to reach. So that's maybe something that I'm going to add in text below, because I will double check and see exactly where the water level is. But here's the thing. That's not going to affect most people, I don't think. I feel like a lot of people, especially who watch this channel, probably not as much 7-inch collectors, probably more in the 10 and 12-inch space. And this will certainly clean both of those things. And again, you can adjust these very easily just by unscrewing, bringing it together, so that you have, a way for your 10-inch records to be sort of fully supported on all sides. All right. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about is the actual attachment construction. I just call it the attachment, but really it's the apparatus that connects to the ultrasonic cleaner in order to sort of support the spindle and the motor and all of these things. So my DIY unit uses it has a motor, it has, power supply, it has clamps, and it has a, small sort of housing for the spindle to connect to. And mine is certainly just simply clunkier, right? It's a combination of pieces, a number of different parts that I sort of stitched together because I was trying to effectively create something that would support the records. And the difference is that the unit, or the attachment that came with the Vevor unit, is obviously fit for purpose. This is what it is for, is to support the motor and the power supply. And it simply has better connectivity to the ultrasonic cleaner, and it's a lot nicer to look at, because this this sort of the box is very well machined for the again, for the motor and the power supply, and it clamps very tightly. It doesn't move around from the ultrasonic cleaner. It doesn't move or jiggle side to side, and it's certainly, it's certainly just a better looking unit versus my sort of Scotch tape and paperclip solution, right? All right, so the next thing is actually the power. Now, one of the things that I like about my DIY unit is I have the ability to sort of toggle the power from basically nothing to very high. So what that means, because I can control the amount of power that the motor is receiving, is that I can have it spin very slow, or I can have it spin very fast. Now, typically, I like to have it spin fairly slow, and I'm not entirely sure why I like doing that. I think it's because in the back of my mind, I thought that if it spun too fast, that maybe that like any individual area of the record wouldn't be submerged for significant enough time in order for it to get clean. Or the other part is I didn't want water to start dripping down the record and getting the label wet. Now, I know I already mentioned earlier in this video that when I was testing this, the labels weren't getting wet. So that wasn't a thing. But this Vevor unit does not allow you to control the speed. And so if you were going to do that, you'd have to get a different power supply. You could still use basically everything on this. You just have to go onto Amazon or somewhere else to find, like a hardware store, something like that, to find a different power supply that would basically dial it back and make the motor slower. But I don't want to necessarily recommend that, just because I don't know. I'm not the person who could advise on exactly what you'd need for that. So at the same time, I do like the ability to control the power on my DIY unit, but I also can't say that there's any problem with the speed that the Vevor unit spins at. All right. And so the last thing, and again, I mentioned these in order of sort of my importance, or the things that I value. The last thing is the draining. So, both of these units have a drain that are on the same side of the unit. Both of those drains work. I kind of did like that the Vevor unit included one of these. So this, secures, it screws onto to the actual unit, and then you just drain it into a sink. You don't need to dump the whole thing. It was, it's just very handy and nice that they actually included one of these. And when I bought my ultrasonic cleaner that I use for my DIY unit, it didn't have one. So I kind of like that. So otherwise, some thoughts, I guess, about this particular unit. Obviously this is suited for record cleaning. However, an ultrasonic cleaner is good for a number of other things as well. So it helps clean rust from metal, although it depends on the metal, and sometimes you need a solution for that to add to the distilled water. But it cleans jewelry, glasses. You can put rubber in there, stones, automotive parts, to the extent they fit anyway, medical instruments, basically anything that has crevices where, dirt or grime collects. So, coins, watches, although careful about submerging a watch. Circuit boards, dentures, possibly Invisalign, which I have at the moment. So anyway, these things are kind of handy to have around the house, but obviously the only time that I've ever used mine, at least thus far, I'm thinking about my wedding ring, but thus far I've only used it for records. One thing I would sort of strongly advise though is that you change out your water or solution specifically for records so that you aren't contaminating your records with anything. But I think if you're new to ultrasonic cleaning, I think it is kind of fun. It is fun to be able to take a record that you thought was clean, stick it through an ultrasonic cleaner, and start seeing what comes out of it. That's nice. And obviously the long-term impact of using an ultrasonic cleaner versus cleaning solutions that aren't ultrasonic is that simply your stylus will get more mileage, right? Because it's not going to be interacting in the grooves of your records with as much, dirt and particles and things like that. And so it's not going to get damaged as quickly, and it's going to be, it's going to help your stylus live a longer life. In addition to obviously the music sounding better. So, I'm generally a fan of an ultrasonic cleaner. I think that's established. And in fact, I've made a video about my DIY solution in the past. And I also think that it's clear that this Vevor solution, this Vevor ultrasonic cleaner, is superior to my existing one for all the reasons that I mentioned. Now, I'm not in a position to tell you whether it's better than some of those high-priced alternatives, but the fact that this is $199 retail, and I think, as of my last check, it looked like they had dropped the price potentially to $136. And I think they actually did give me a code for anybody who out there who wants to, who is interested in buying this, that gives you an additional, I think, something like 5% off. So you can check the description for this video to find that link. And again, I can't commit to what the listed price is going to be on the website by the time you see this. But again, at last check, I think they dropped it down to $136, plus you get an additional 5% off. So, here's the thing. If you've been considering doing a DIY unit, you're going to spend more. I spent $193 building mine, and that was 3 years ago, 4 years ago, something like that. So it is going to be cheaper to buy their solution, and I think it's probably going to be better constructed than anything that you would do, unless you do a significantly better job than I did. So that's kind of my assessment. I wish that this company was making this unit 4 years ago when I bought mine, and now I have two, and I'm gonna use the Vevor unit, as my preferred unit. And to the extent I keep the other one, I don't even know. Maybe I'll find somebody who needs one, or maybe I'll just have two so I can be cleaning twice as many records at the same time. So that is my that's my assessment of this. And this is I'm still in unfamiliar territory, right? Because I don't typically review things like this. Certainly I haven't reviewed any record players, at least not call it as a service. I've talked about my record player purchase, but I haven't done it on behalf of a company. So this is the first time that I've kind of done one of these reviews on behalf of a company. And I don't feel bad doing it, again, because I like the unit. I saw that there was problems with my existing one, and now I have a better one that I can have and keep. So so that's kind of my those are my thoughts. I'm curious. I'll tell you what, if anybody has any questions, I'll try to do a better job than I do otherwise of checking the comments of this video, and I can try to answer any questions. I'm obviously not an expert on the product, but having used the product, I can at least give you more detail about my experience in case anybody has any questions. So that's it for today. Thanks very much, everyone, and thanks Vevor for sending over this unit. And I guess I'll see you all next time.